Some say that freedom is forged, not given. I don't know. I think there's some value there. I think there's some valuable insight.
I would agree.
It's not just something that you're going to get. You have to work towards it. I know one of the Marine Corps' big things, one of the ad campaigns was steel forges steel.
Forged in steel, yeah.
There's a lot of parallels with metalwork, apparently, in American and Marine Corps. In our legacy.
Go figure.
Yeah, you gotta take something that's, a valuable material, and then you heat it and melt it and make it malleable, and then you can then turn it into something. And I think one of the things we do oftentimes, especially for those who are outside of the service now, is we find that the self-motivation to do that starts to wane, especially as I'm staring at 50 now. It's not so easy for steel to forge steel.
Yeah, no, I'm way beyond 50.
Well, here's an idea then. Here's one way, especially when...
How can I motivate myself, Vic? What do you think?
I think one of the things we can look at is as we're trying to heat things up, especially, we're coming out of this crazy bomb cyclone thing here. We've got to heat things up a little bit. We've got to become malleable. We got to start turning ourselves into something. We're already valuable. We just need to shape it and make us worth something. And one way you can do that is you can take on the Forged in Freedom 250 challenge offered by the Marine Corps Association Foundation. And to do that, you can complete 250 miles.
Oh, yeah? How do you do the 250? Do you have to run? Because I don't like to run.
Well, you don't have to run. There's a myriad of ways. You could run if you're, that's freaking badass. Or if you're like Sergeant Major Justin LaHue, you could walk it.
Yeah.
You could bike it.
Yeah.
You could swim it. You can row it. As long as you're doing something that is physically exerting and that takes you a distance. So, you can, I would love to be able to bench 250 pounds. That would be awesome. It's not a qualifier for this. I should still do that.
Okay.
But if you want to participate, you better run, walk, bike, swim, row, in any of those combinations or one of them individually between March 3rd and July 4th.
Okay, so how do I register for this?
Okay, very great question. So if you go to mca-marines.org/MCA events, that's EVENTS, MCA events, /category/foundation-events.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. That's a mouthful. But you could also just text America's 250 to 41444.
Awesome.
That's America's 250 to 41444.
That is very cool. And how am I going to prove to people that I did this? If I do this, that's a big if. I don't know if I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to give it a shot. How do I prove it?
Well, give it a shot, and not only will you be forging your own steel, but you'll be able to get a keepsake of that forged steel in an exclusive commemorative coin.
Love a coin. Yeah. I love a coin. Okay.
So once you register, I think it gives you all of the sort of accountability. I mean, quite honest, I think it's an honor system. But, don't shortchange yourself. This is about, obviously the coin is amazing. But, it's about, again, steel forging steel. It's about about not just taking on something, but appreciating it and working towards it. Remember, freedom is forged, not given.
Okay. And it's
just like this coin is not given. It's got to be earned.
Okay, and it's called the Forged in Freedom 250 Challenge,
right?
That's
right.
Okay.
In honor of America's, 250th birthday.
I love it. Sounds good.
Awesome. See you on the road. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. Welcome to episode 235. This week, we welcome Josh Cannon to the Scuttlebutt. Josh is a veteran Marine of OIF and the Director of Research for the Frederick Honors College at the University of Pittsburgh. He's also the author of Fatal Second Helen, a modern veteran's Iliad, a book that overlays his experience in combat with the themes of the Iliad. This is a fascinating discussion about what it is that the narrative of the Iliad did for the ancient Greeks and how it applies to us today, especially those who wear the uniform. We joke about the action heroes of the 80s and 90s and how fun these movies were, but how these stories are infamous for being shallow and having one-dimensional characters. Josh helps us understand that this tradition is actually prevalent throughout history, with the Iliad in particular, a text written around 8th century BC, as not only one of the oldest surviving literary works, but possibly the first recorded action story, as it's so similar to the action genre of the Schwarzenegger and Stallone films. Also, we want to recognize that March is the 110th anniversary of the Marine Corps Gazette being in continuous publication. A wonderful milestone, and congratulations to the Gazette staff, past and present. This is episode 235. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. Thank you for joining us and your continued support. I'm Vic. I'm here with Nancy.
Hey, Vic. How you doing?
Pretty well. Yeah, my youngest's birthday was last week.
Oh, nice.
And then he got sick.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, that kind of sucked. I think really what it was is we went, I think, an entire day without a sugary or wasted carb. And so I think he got sick just because he ate. Like, he started the day off with a cinnamon roll and then went.
Breakfast of champions.
Right? And then we had a piñata. It was like a
Oh,
thing.
my gosh.
So that busted open, and that was just a gorge
More
fest.
sugar.
So we just played video games and ate
Dang.
candy all day, and then we're wondering why he woke up with a sore throat.
Why was I not invited to this sugar fest?
We didn't want to do like a Billy Madison reenactment where you're like shoving kids out of the way to get to the candy.
And I would, too. I would do that. I would so do that.
Yeah, so that kind of delayed things. So it's not like him being sick didn't cancel it. It just postponed. So now we're into what would be week 2, but really is only day 2. So we're going to go bowling later this afternoon. It's one of the events.
Oh, that's right. Your kids each get a, like, hey, plan the perfect day situation or an activity?
Activities.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we give them each a $200 budget that they can spend on a party
Nice.
with friends or a series of events. And so with the postponement, so today's bowling, I think Sky Zone's Friday, Chuck E. Cheese tomorrow, and then Monday's Top Golf.
Wow.
The thing is
And
really,
all for, that all comes in under $200.
It's way cheaper than throwing a party, actually.
Nice.
Because then we don't have to pay for the food, and we don't have a ton of...
Also, you don't have to talk with the annoying people.
There's no kid. Yeah, I don't have to make small talk with parents who's like friends. Yeah, it's really great, and it also is teaching them to be economic with their thing because they could do just one huge whatever.
Sure.
And
That's
learned,
really clever.
Yeah, and so they know like, well, Chuck E. Cheese, if you just pay, I think it's like whatever this flat rate is, you get an hour to just go ham.
Not sponsored by Chuck E. Cheese,
No, not
but
at
we
all.
are willing to take your ad dollars if you're listening.
Yeah, Chuck E. Cheese, feel free to jump in on this. But yeah, anyway, so it's been really cool, and they also like they sort of learn from each other, like a
Nice.
support by fire position. So
Okay.
like one will do something, and then the other one is like, hey, that was pretty cool, or that went pear-shaped,
Nice.
and so then they'll figure out something else.
I like it.
Yeah, like my eldest last year did the free fall with
I would
the
never do that.
massive, it's like a 4-story thing with the massive fan.
Hard pass.
Yeah,
No.
he loved it. His little brother
No.
was like you. Like, that's not going to be
Just you talking about it, I'm not kidding. I'm getting like a tightness in my chest. Nope. Afraid of heights. Nope.
Yeah, no, it's been really cool. So, yeah, that's what I got going. How about you? Anything?
Well, not as
special?
exciting as that. Really, I got nothing.
No.
I got nothing. I'm sorry. The Olympics are over. I got nothing.
But Leatherneck's still chugging along.
Leatherneck is the best,
Yeah,
really.
shameless
So,
plug.
readers, if you're not, or listeners, if you're not reading Leatherneck, then you're missing out, and you need to pick up a copy or go
Agreed.
online and read the digital version.
know.
Shameless plug.
How the hell are you dropping a number 2 if you don't have a Leatherneck magazine to keep you company?
Okay. Places I did not know this conversation was going.
Well, a place that we will be going and we
Okay,
should
Vic.
be going
Yeah.
is to welcome our guest, Josh Cannon, to the show. Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and maybe you can elevate this conversation from
not
where
hard.
we just were.
We set the basement pretty low, so this it's all up from here.
Welcome.
So you're coming in from Pittsburgh, so thank you so much for being here in the studio with us and putting those miles on.
Yeah,
on the
it makes a
road.
big difference. It's easier to talk face to face.
Agreed.
Real face to face instead of computer face to face.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you're a former Marine. Did you ever, were the crossroads in a part of your career, or was Quantico just something that you knew about?
No, I knew about it more from like TV and movies. Right, like isn't it where the FBI,
really?
like
Yeah.
where
Yeah, the FBI
Clarice,
Academy. That's right. Right.
Yeah.
Signs of the Lamb. She's doing a pistol
is,
course.
that's right.
So I was like, oh, that's Quantico, right? And so, no, I was almost exclusively Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
Good old Camp Lejeune. So.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, for our listeners, Josh is here to. Well, he's got a book out called "Fatal Second Helen: The Modern Veteran's Iliad." And this book, well, as we dive into it, is really great. The cover is fantastic, where you have a Greek spearman, and then on the other side is a Marine, a modern-day Marine on patrol. And I think that juxtaposition with the Iliad as its focus
Very cool.
I mean, it's an ingenious idea. This isn't something new for you, though. You're a professor and you teach the Iliad, is that right?
Right. I teach a bunch of different courses, but one of them is ancient epic, and that's 3 different texts, and the Iliad is one of those texts. And I can't take any credit for the cover. I actually designed a cover that I really liked, but the publishers Blue Ear Books, their graphic designer was like, oh, that's nice.
That's cute.
Yeah. And
Look at him.
He kind of put it over here, and then he was like, how about this? I was like, oh, yeah, that's better.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's awesome. So let's retcon this thing. Retro?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
a nerd term. Actually, it's sort of negative. It's when you have a story that doesn't fit, and so
Oh.
you go back and do a flashback to make.
I
all
might
of
be
it
the
come-
dumb one in this
Yeah.
conversation today.
So this is actually more of a flashback. It's not retconning because your history is your history.
Okay.
But what was your path to the Yellow Footprints? Like, how did you become a Marine?
I started thinking, I remember very specifically, I started thinking about it the summer after my freshman year of high school.
And this is in the Pittsburgh area?
Yes.
All right, okay.
So this is 97, summer of 97. I was really lucky. One of my close friends asked me to come vacation with him and his family in this little lake town called Deep Creek. Is it Maryland? Anyway, it doesn't matter. West Virginia. Anyway, and we go there, and his older brother, who was like 20, also brought a friend, and this guy just got out of boot camp. And I don't know if it was his it couldn't have been his leave after boot camp. Maybe it was.
Could have been boot leave, yeah.
It could have been. I was, I didn't understand those things back then, and that's 30
Maybe
years
it's
ago.
recruiter's assistance or something.
Something, yeah, that's an even better guess. But I was just captivated by him, and he's talking about the training he got, and he had some of his uniforms, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's clearly really, really exciting. And I had thought just a little bit like, oh, I wonder if even before that summer in my freshman year, I thought, oh, maybe I could do like a service academy. That sounds like a really cool thing. And I was also very conscious of the idea that college is expensive. I was like, oh, the service academies are free. So it would be really cool. It would be exciting. I'd feel like a tough guy. And it would be free. Like, we're checking a lot of boxes here. And then I think I got like a C in, I forget what math it was, algebra or geometry.
Oh, I got that too.
And I was like, oh, wait a
Wow,
second.
you guys are super smart. You got a C in math. Way better than I did.
Well, I remember thinking like, oh, shoot, those service academies are probably really hard to get into. And here I am with a C in whatever my freshman math class is. So when I meet this enlisted Marine on vacation that summer, I was like, oh, that's the way to go. And so that was it. I made my decision as, 15 years old.
Wow.
I was like, I'm going to enlist in the Marine Corps. And then fast forward 2 years later, when the summer that I was 17, I went to the recruiting office, and it was Staff Sergeant Demko. If he's listening, I don't remember your first name, but hugely influential person in my life. And I was like, I want to go. And this is before my senior year. And so, and I was 17, so my parents had to, sign with me, I guess. And I joined the delayed entry program. And I remember my recruiters are great. He was like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, it'd be kind of cool to be a mechanic because then for the rest of my life I could fix my own car.
Yeah.
And I
What
think
a
that's
great
so
idea.
Very practical.
Well, then, I don't. I'm not always that practical. So maybe in my youth it got knocked out of me, or maybe my
in
parents
boot camp.
had.
It got knocked out of you in boot camp.
Maybe my parents had these terrible car bills. And I was like, oh, I got to avoid that. And so Sergeant Demko, he's like, all right, take this practice ASVAB. And we'll talk about that. So it was like, I'm sure everyone did this that enlisted. It's like 20 questions, or I don't remember how many. And I did really well on it. And he goes, I don't want. I'm not going to let you be a mechanic. And that's no offense to mechanics, right? Like they're smarter than I am in what they do. So I think they're very smart. And he's like, you did really well on this ASVAB. So we should do something that utilizes your intelligence more. And so I said, well, okay, what's the smartest thing you got? And he said the cryptologic linguistics program. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And it was that simple.
Wow.
I liked language maybe more than average, but like I didn't go into the Marine Corps being like, I want to go learn another language. But because my recruiter said, that's the smartest thing we got, I was like, yeah, all right, let's do that. And that was it.
Well, so this is one of my favorite things I like to know. How did your family react and respond? And were they all in favor from the get-go when you said you were going to enlist in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, my family was wonderfully supportive. My dad, so I didn't really come from a military-heavy family, and I came from a neighborhood in Pittsburgh that didn't send its kids to the military. People were going to schools instead of enlisting and whatnot. So I didn't have a lot of people to talk to about it. I spent most of my time in the recruiter's office learning from them, but they were very supportive. Again, this was the late 90s. Bill Clinton was the president. Like, I remember thinking...
I joined 97, too.
Yeah,
so,
I remember thinking, I'm going to do, like, maybe a Mediterranean cruise, or maybe I'll go to... someone had told me that Australia was a really great tour of duty. I was like, yeah, that'd be so cool to go to Australia. And so that's just what I imagined would happen. Like, I would go...
This life of adventure.
And I was a wrestler and a boxer, and I was like, I bet the Marines love wrestling and boxing. So I'm going to get there, and like every weekend, we're just going to beat each other up all the time. And I'm just going to be so... And the thing was, I wasn't like that good at either.
Yes.
So I wasn't thinking, I should go wrestle in college, or I should go do like Golden Gloves. I wasn't anywhere close to those ideas. So I was like, I just want a bunch of tough dudes that'll box and wrestle with me on the weekends while we're in the Mediterranean.
On the beach in Darwin.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So that was my 17, turning into 18-year-old mind at the time. And in the delayed entry program, and nobody did anything to disabuse me of these ideas. The recruiter's like, yeah, they'll beat you up over there.
Yeah. Japan, Australia, San Diego.
You'll get knocked around plenty. And so I left. So yeah, I joined a delayed entry program the summer before senior year, and so this was very foolish. But I left for boot camp 2 weeks after I graduated high school. So I'm in Paris Island, sweating and getting yelled at, and all my friends are just like having one more glorious summer, and writing me letters, being like, "We wish you were here. We went to the beach," and which Pittsburgh doesn't have a beach. They went to the Atlantic Ocean for a trip, but that was difficult. And then I got to, and then I went through Marine combat training like everybody does, well, everybody who's non-infantry does. And then I went to the Defense Language Institute, where once again...
so that's in Monterey.
Yes, so Monterey, California.
This is your first West Coast?
Yeah.
Is this the first time you've ever been?
I mean, the furthest I'd been away prior to... would have been Paris Island.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I didn't travel very much.
And Monterey is so beautiful.
I'm about to say, that's a big difference from...
Yeah,
Paris Island, South Carolina.
I think I even realized then how lucky I was for my MOS school to be in Monterey, and not only to be in Monterey, but my instructors were like these native Arab grandparents.
Yeah.
So we'd go to formation, and then we'd leave formation and go to school, and it was, I don't remember the hours, like 0800 to 1600 with a 2-hour lunch break, if I remember, something like that,
Nice.
if I remember correctly. So you were in school all day, or no, it was an hour and a half lunch break. But anyway, you were in school all day, and it wasn't like staff sergeants and gunnies yelling at you or teaching you stuff in a harsh way. It was like these really wonderful Arabic grandparents, like gently coaxing you into declining the Arabic verb. And it was just amazing in Monterey, California.
Yeah, I know.
Tough assignment.
I know. So, but then at 1600, we'd go back and we'd PT and whatever else. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still in the military. I forgot about that.
Had you ever learned a foreign language in high school?
So I had studied is a generous verb here, but I'd studied German in middle school. And then when I got to high school, you could continue with German or you could take Latin. I was like, oh, Latin's really cool. And I already liked the classics. Like I had already read the Iliad and I was reading Greek mythology and I was reading, and it's like, oh, Latin will get me closer to these topics than German will.
Interesting.
And so I studied Latin for 4 years in high school. So again, I liked language and I thought it was interesting, but my entry into language in the military was purely...
Do you think that helped
Circumstances,
with the
yeah.
Like when you had to take the D lab, right? Like
I did take the D lab, and I've got a funny story about that. So, this is pre-digital, so we have a little cassette tape, and actually, I'm not allowed, I don't know if you're supposed to talk about it. I think it's a little bit like not top secret, but you're not. I won't go into detail about it.
No, it's like SEER school, right? Like you're not supposed to talk.
Maybe
about
that's what it is. So they put me in a room and they give me this cassette tape, and I put it in there, and it's somebody goes, okay, you're now going to hear 4 words in a foreign language, and you have to identify which one has a different stress. So 3 of them, will be stressed on the second syllable, but 1 of them will be stressed on the first syllable. You need to figure that out. So I'm doing that, and then there's like these weird pictures, and like the pictures tell a story, and I did this, I don't know, 27 years ago, so it's a little bit fuzzy. But so anyway, I go through all that stuff, I get out, and somehow, maybe it was a Scantron sheet, but they were able to score it instantly. And there's this gunnery, a real tough, he was probably like 30 years old, but back then it was like this real haggard, like hard-lived gunny. He looks at my score, I forget what the number was, let's say it was like 115. He goes, oh, you got a 115, you failed. And I was like, oh shoot, I was told, and I remember thinking, this is actually in MEP, so this is, I think I was probably 17. And I'm like, oh gosh, this guy's like really intense. And I was like, but I had been told that a 100 was a passing score. So I say, could you double check, Gunnery Sergeant, because I think that 100 is the passing score. And he goes, what? Give me a second. I was, oh yeah, you're right, you pass. But like if I hadn't known that,
right,
and if I hadn't double checked,
you'd have been a grunt.
Who knows what they would have been like needs of the Marine Corps would have been, wherever I would have gone. So that's another, like, wow, I kind of dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
I don't know why he thought, he had the wrong passing. It's one of the smallest MOSs.
Yeah. So
he wasn't seeing a lot of linguists coming through the door.
When I was on recruiting duty, I don't think we administered a single D-Lab test. This was in Atlanta where,
Yeah, so our MOS school was really, I was there for a year and a half. It's a really long school. And even with that length of training, there was still like 200 of us, 150 of us. It was a really, really small MOS.
Yeah. That's awesome. So then, did you already know at that point you're headed to Camp Lejeune, or did you get orders there?
No. So I went from the Defense Language Institute to Goodfellow Air Force Base. That's where I did my intel training, and that was where
I see.
And I remember they said obviously you can go tactical or support. And I kind of wanted to go to Fort Meade. There was a unit at Fort Meade which would have obviously been support. And I was like, oh, I'd be so close to Pittsburgh. That'd be great. I'd go home. And so I put that as I put that as my second choice because, like, I don't know what the actual numbers were, but a majority of us were all being sent tactical, right? And this is, so I went to boot camp in the summer of 2000. And then I was halfway through Arabic school when September 11th happened.
Oh, gosh.
So all of us who were Arabic linguists were like, oh, shoot, we're probably going tactical. Yeah. So the strategy there was they did ask us to, like, list our top 3 choices. And I thought, well, it was either Hawaii or Lejeune. And I was like, Hawaii is the furthest away. Well, not the furthest, but too far away from Pittsburgh. At least Lejeune, I could still drive. It's all kind of long. So I put Lejeune first and Fort Meade second, hoping that maybe like, oh, we got plenty of people for Lejeune. Let's give this guy Fort. But they gave me Lejeune. I was like, all right, I'll go. And I'd been to for Marine combat training. That was in was that Camp Geiger, I think. So I'd been close to Lejeune. But had never actually, and also I was there for MCT. You're oblivious, like you're in and you're out. Like I couldn't even tell you I'd been to Camp Geiger because yes, technically I'd been there, but I don't know what was there. I was in the woods the whole time, so and then I landed at Lejeune. Would have been late summer of 2002, and then January of 2003, I was on a ship to head into Kuwait.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then I guess just going back a little bit for the Arabic speaking part of it, I know some of my buddies who went into the linguistics, moved into the linguistics field, were like, oh, I had a guy who was, he was of Latin descent. I forget if he was Colombian or, but anyways, he was like, hey, I'm just gonna go. I'll speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And then I'll, kind of coast through DLA with Spanish, and then I'll be an attaché in like Colombia or something. This will be perfect.
Great plan.
Unbelievable. It makes total sense. But then he did too well on the D Lab, and he got like Russian or something crazy.
Oh yeah.
All right, they're Captain Sanchez. I guess you're Russian stuff. So I mean, I guess that's a stupid anecdote, but I mean, how is that how you sort of like? Did you go into this expecting, hey, I'm going to learn a specific? Were you tied to a language, or are you just like whatever you guys?
So
teach me, I'll learn.
When I got there in 2000, so the Defense Language Institute teaches something like 30 languages. I forget the exact number, or it did 26 years ago. I'm sure maybe it's only grown. But in the Marine Corps, you can only do Korean, Spanish, Russian, or Arabic.
Oh, interesting.
And while I was there, they added Chinese.
Okay.
But everyone that they put in the Chinese program failed it, so then they took the Chinese away. When I got there, our detachment commander was a major, and he had designed a test by himself, as far as I could tell, or that was the rumor. He didn't tell me, of course. I was a little Lance Corporal, but the test was supposed to determine what type of language you would be most proficient at.
Right.
So the Arabic and Korean, those were the 1.5 year long programs. Russian was a year, and Spanish was half of a year. So I don't fully understand this, but my basic understanding is if you can memorize things rapidly, they toss you into Spanish because that moved really fast. If you learn things maybe less rapidly, but you can maintain them, they put you in Arabic or Korean because it just lasted forever. And I guess if you were in the middle, they gave you Russian. And I thought, well, none of these languages are particularly exciting to me, but Russian would be cool. That was my first. And I think they let us list our choices. So I think if I remember correctly, I put down Russian, and then they gave me Arabic. And I remember, I guess that's what the test must have indicated. I'd be a good fit for Arabic. But then everybody in my Arabic class was in the first half of the alphabet. And then all the Korean guys were in the middle. And I was like, oh, wait a second. It sure looks, so it was Cannon, Coles, Anderson, all the C's and G's. And I was
Keep it simple.
I think you just went down the roster and said, okay, we need 8 guys for Arabic. These top 8 go. We need 4 guys for Korean. So because Korean was Nevet and Shoppy and Pauly, the N's and the S's and the P's. I was like, okay, I think I see how this got done. So I took this.
Good pattern recognition.
Yeah, right. So, but we did have, in our Arabic class, we did have a guy named Villanueva. I'm like, oh, that breaks the pattern. So now I don't understand. So who knows? Who knows?
Doing it just to keep you guys on your toes.
Yeah, but again, I was assigned Arabic in, it would have been October of 2000. So again, we all knew Arabic was going to be important, but obviously not anywhere near what it became a year later, just less than a year later.
Do you mind talking about that a little bit, seeing as we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of September 11th?
I didn't think about it. Yeah, I didn't put that together as 25.
And how, I mean, I don't want to hijack that was a bad choice of words. I don't want to take the conversation off into too much of a different direction, but what was that experience like for you guys learning Arabic?
So the attacks happened, if I remember correctly, like around, was it like at 9:30 in the morning, Eastern time? So we were obviously West Coast, so we're 3 hours behind. So we're waking up and getting showered, getting ready for I think formation was at 0700. And so I remember walking out of the shower, walking down the hallway, and everyone's like, turn your TVs on, turn your TVs on. And I'm like, oh, shoot. So I run down the hallway, I get to my room, and my roommate's already in there watching TV, and I got there just in time to see this. I think a lot of people have this story. I got there just in time to see the second plane hit.
That's exactly what
that's my story, too.
Yeah, I remember like, oh, what movie is this? Like, it was surreal, it didn't seem real. So I'm like, this is a movie, or like, are they excited about like filming a new movie, and this is a really crazy stunt that they did? And obviously within moments I was like, oh my God, this is not a stunt. And then I realized, oh, that's the second one that went down. And so it was incredibly depressing and scary. And we go to formation, and our Sergeant McNulty, I remember him, Salty McNulty, our platoon sergeant's like, when you have a break today, call your parents. and tell them you're okay. I mean, of course, they know you're not in New York, but just they're going to be nervous to check in with them, and that was great advice. I did that.
Really good advice.
And
yeah.
and then an Arabic class. So as I said, all of our teachers were native Arabs, right? I mean, they were government employees,
Sure,
but they were
yeah.
native Arabs, and so they were very somber because I have to imagine if you were an Arabic person in the United States that day, you'd be like, oh boy, it's a little uncomfortable. Like, folks might be angry with me, or folks are going to be, these Americans are going to be angry about this. Well, they were Americans too, but,
Right.
Well, just understanding what's coming.
Yeah, well, and they weren't wrong, unfortunately. There was, I don't know about any of our instructors if they saw any anger in that regard, but certainly other Arabs in the United States did. And so I don't think we even did lessons that day. I think we watched the news together and like spoke kind of quietly, but it was just, it was obviously a terrible shock, and there was no way to think about what do you do with this information. You just have to be together and get through it. And so, and it was, I don't think it was in that moment, but it was shortly thereafter that us students were like, ooh, this has some implications for what our future might look like.
What you're
Because
learning.
again, up to that point, I was still thinking maybe I can do this med cruise, or maybe I can, and I was like, oh gosh, that feels, I mean, I was pretty naive, I was 19, had been in the military for a little over a year. So I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I was like, I feel like the med cruise is less likely now.
Yeah.
Or if there is one, it's to get me to.
Yeah, it's just passing by.
I did. I was on the USS Saipan, and as I said, I boarded ship January of 2003, and we did go through the Mediterranean, which was pretty cool, but it was so that we could go to Kuwait, not so we could just kind of poke around and go to ports of call.
There
and
weren't
what
any
have
fun
you.
liberty.
There was no liberty whatsoever. Yeah. So.
And so you talk about some of the stuff in your book, which I think is really good, and as we're talking about you now in the operational mode. So I guess just sort of a brief overview. So you were there for the invasion in 2003, and then you went back again?
Yeah, in 2004 with the 2-4
Okay. So you floated in both times?
No, the Mu, they actually flew us in.
Oh, interesting.
And they flew us commercial.
Nice.
Yeah.
Into Kuwait again? Is that where did you fly into?
Yeah, I think it was. Well, I remember. I don't remember where we flew out of. For some, I mean, what? Yeah, I don't remember where we flew out of, but yeah, we flew into Kuwait City, if I remember correctly, and then spent a couple weeks in Kuwait, and then we for the 2-4 we were up in the Hilla province. So we're back again. I was mostly in the Hilla. So the Hilla province is just south of Baghdad, and it's where Babylon is, the ruins of Babylon, and one of Hussein's palaces is there. We got to check that out, and so I was there. So for the invasion, I pushed all the way up to Afghanistan, or to Baghdad with everybody else. And then when we had taken Baghdad and things settled down, I was put on a team that went down to Hilla, which is, if I remember correctly, I apologize if people know the geography better and they're banging on their steering wheel right now, but Hilla, the capital city of Hilla province, and then Babylon is very close to Hilla, the city. And so we spent a lot of time in Hilla, Mahmudiyya, Yusufiyya, Iskandariya, which was founded by Alexander the Great. So Iskandariya is Alexander.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I only discovered that later, but I was like, oh my gosh, I got to spend time in one of the cities that Alexander the Great founded. And Alexander the Great died at Babylon.
Yeah, but I say because Archicestophan is not too far from Baghdad.
Yeah,
right?
And so I was just vaguely, I mean, I liked history a lot at that age, at that stage in my life, but wasn't nearly as educated on it as I kind of wish I could have been. And so I had some awareness of these things, but it wasn't until later that I reflected, like, oh my gosh, Baghdad's pretty cool. And I got to be there, I got to see it. And I spent a lot of time in Iskandariya. And I was like, I mean, there's nothing about this makes you think about Alexander the Great, but he was here once, and he founded the city. He named I have one of the classes I teach, I have a map, there's a lot of Iskandariyas, or some variation of that. Alexander founded a bunch of cities in his name. Sure. So Alexandria in Egypt is the most famous, but yeah.
Well, I mean, that whole region is just, it's just a nexus of histories and civilizations.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Everything. I mean, if you even trace back to, Abraham came from somewhere
Ur.
in the kind of region.
Or the Chaldees, which, not to go too much into a down a rabbit hole, but so for the longest time, people thought that was Ur in southern Iraq. But there's actually a city in Turkey called Urfa, right? And now, I shouldn't say now, but maybe in the last couple of decades, scholars have been like, I wonder if actually it was that city of Ur that Abraham might have been from.
Yeah, because I didn't realize the Chaldeans had reached that far south.
Yeah, it's geographic. It fits a little bit better geographically.
Okay,
so,
interesting.
but again, he's kind of a legendary character. So who knows?
Yeah.
What has changed in the telling of his story?
Sure. Yeah, I guess it always seemed to make sense that he would have followed the Euphrates west. But yeah, that's really fascinating, the things that we're uncovering. And speaking of uncovering, so you finish out your tour.
2005.
And then what led you into then academia, specifically literature?
Well, so I liked, at this point in my life, I really liked language. Being an Arabic linguist in Iraq was great because the Iraqis thought you were fascinating. They would come up, as soon as they knew I would chat with them, and others would be like, what's that guy doing speaking Arabic?
Right.
So they would want to talk to me, and they would complain about stuff, or they'd want to be my friend, or they think I'm a hookup, which I was never able to. I was a corporal. I was like, they're not. I was a corporal for the invasion, then I was a sergeant on the MEU. I was like, there's only so much I can do, and I don't even know what that would be. But they still thought I was fascinating, and so I loved being in a foreign country where I could speak the language, right? And so when I get to college, I was like, I got to do something with language. Like, this is really fun. It's something I've got a background in now. And I remember thinking I wanted to do like computer linguistics, right, or computational linguistics or something like that. I was like, I think that would be cool. I think I could make some money that way. It would be really exciting. And so I arrogantly, perhaps foolishly, certainly, in my very first, I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I went back to Pittsburgh to go to school, and I enrolled in a Java language programming class.
Yeah.
But I did the intermediate class.
Oh,
nice.
Because I don't know why. Because I was young and dumb.
Marines.
And I remember I got a D on my midterm. And I was like, this is taking me back to freshman year high school where I got a C on my math class. And I was like, my dreams are being shattered here. And so I got a D on my midterm, and I was like, okay, that's a rough start to college. And I remember I went to the professor and I said, hey, like, I'm not doing so great. Like, best case scenario, what's the best grade I can get for this class? Like, well, getting a D in your midterm knocks you down a couple of pegs. And so I just withdrew. Like, I withdrew. There was some kind of deadline where you could basically just drop a
drop ad. I'm well familiar with drop ad.
And so it doesn't show up on my transcripts to this day. And by a wonderful coincidence, I was also taking an intro to archaeology class, which I did because I thought it'd be a blast. I loved archaeology. I liked reading about archaeology. I thought it was interesting. But at the time, it was just to be a fun class.
Yeah.
But then it became a career.
That's really cool.
And a big part behind that is the professor he's still at Pitt. We're still friends. Brian Hanks loved veterans. And it's like an intro class. There's like 100 students. But he kind of noticed me, and at one point he asked me to come up and give a talk about my time at Babylon, which I was like, oh my gosh, I'm honored to do this. And so and I said to him, I was like, I've always liked archaeology, I've always liked history, and now I like language. Like, what's the career like in this? And he's like, well, actually, it's pretty hard. There's not a lot of professorships, there's not a lot of people throwing money around for archaeologists. He's like, but you can do it.
Yeah, Indiana Jones, that era has come and gone.
and so I said, well, then I'm going to give it a shot. And I majored in anthropology and linguistics. And then I went to Chicago for my PhD in Near Eastern Studies, which obviously brought me back. And I worked out of Turkey. I did my archaeological research in Turkey, a couple different locations in Turkey.
Interesting.
It was awesome. The food, made it worth it. I mean, lots of other things made it worth it, but just eating Turkish food for months on end, spectacular. And then when I was about to graduate, I thought, well, okay, a lot of PhDs try to pursue a professorship, and what that often means is there aren't a lot of those positions. So what that often means is you do these things called postdoctoral work, and sometimes you do 2 or 3 of them, and sometimes they're across the country and you're moving around. And I had 3 kids at this point. We just had our youngest. He's 7 now, about to turn 8, and so I was like, I just didn't want to yank my family back and forth across the country. And I said, well, let's just go to Pittsburgh. My wife wasn't from Pittsburgh, but she finished her high school in Pittsburgh, so she was really comfortable. So I said, let's go back to Pittsburgh. I'll find a job. And I ended up finding a job in the University of Pittsburgh in the Honors College, helping students apply for competitive scholarships and fellowships. And now I've since been promoted. I'm the director of research for that college, and that just means I help students find research opportunities. But I also get to teach, so I'm also faculty in the classics department, and when they need me, I'm faculty in the anthropology department.
Oh, that's awesome!
So I've got this kind of hybrid staff faculty role, which I tell people it gives me the best of both, and none of the bad things. So I don't have to go for tenure. It's not publish or perish, and then from the staff side, I get to still be an academic while I'm also advising students.
That's so cool. And then, so where did your sort of love, so the book, Fatal Second Helen, like we talked about in the intro, is this really, really rich juxtaposition between your experiences in Babylon and then the Iliad and the Greeks and the, what is, it's still considered, Troy was in Turkey.
Yes.
Right. So we have that region where you've spent a good chunk of your young life in a much different context. I mean, the Arabic training that we got, was something I had to shoehorn into our training plan. And, it was, I think, did we do 5 weeks, like every other day for an hour, which was way more than any of the other units. Most units were getting 5 days where they were just like, how do you say tank? How do you say bomb? How do you say stop? That kind of stuff. Stop the car, turn the car off. And I definitely, what you're talking about resonate with me is even having that not very beginner level Arabic, but being able to share ideas with a, somewhat coherent common language. Anyhow, very long way of introing this question, but like, what was it about the Iliad, given your experiences and then your academic studies, that really sort of coalesced into this book?
So I'd always liked, I remember when I was a kid, I discovered Greek mythology. I think it was 4th grade. And I was just reading like Edith Hamilton, like Bullfinch and all the famous mythology. Delirious was one of my favorites. And I remember in the back of my mind, like, well, the Iliad is like the adult, not like in a sexy way, but it's like the adult version. It's the
the grown up version.
And I was like, someday I'll get to that. So I remember I waited a little bit, but I think I was in middle school, and I was like, all right, I'm tagged. I read the Penguin edition of the Iliad, and it's something I talk about in my book a little bit. It can be a hard read, right? It's a long book. It has it's got so many really exciting passages where people just go on,
killing sprees,
right? Their wrecking ball is working their way through the enemy forces, and like when Achilles comes back to fight, it's like gripping. Like it's so to me, and I think to a lot of people, it's really fascinating. But in between that is like the catalog of the ships, where for like 50 pages, like, and then 12 ships came from this part of Greece, and so okay, that's a little bit of a slog to get through that. And so I had to push myself, but but the exciting parts, the mythology parts were exciting enough. And I remember finishing it, and I was like, I loved that. And then I went from reading it to like thinking about it or reading what other people were having to say about it. But it was always a hobby. It was always in the back burner. And it wasn't until I got to college and took that archaeology class and then started taking classics courses, like, oh, I could actually like spend time with this and not just read it for pleasure, but read it to think, are there things that I want to say about it? Are there things that haven't yet been said about it, right? And that's what scholarship is trying to do, is like, can you say something new? Can you find something new? Can you show something new?
I love that idea.
And so in the back of my mind, and this took many, many years, but in the back of my mind, I was like, well, there's not a lot of classics people. There's not a lot of people in the classics field who are also there's not a lot of people in higher ed who are also veterans.
That's true,
I think that there should be, and one of the things that I'm working on is finding more ways to get veterans into higher ed, because I think their voices should be heard there. But the truth of the matter is there's not a lot of veterans in higher ed generally, or veterans in humanities and classics specifically. And so I was like, well, then there's things that I can say that I don't see anybody else around me being able to say. And so this little seed of an idea was planted that way. It's like, well, the Iliad is like this really famous story about war. I've been to war. almost anybody else that's writing about. I mean, there's some counterexamples. Bernard Knox is one of my favorites. He is an army, or was. He passed away in the 90s, but he fought in World War II. He fought in Spain for the Spanish Civil War. Got shot in the neck.
Jeez.
And like walked himself to a hospital that was miles away. Like he's got a great story, and he was also a brilliant classicist. So
Jeez.
I'm not trying to be like, I'm the first one, everybody, look at me.
Yeah.
But it is a small crowd. And so I remember I wrote the introductory chapter to the book, or a version of it, an earlier draft. And it was like, here's who I am and why, both academically and militarily, if that's an adverb.
Yes,
we'll work
it
on
is
it.
now.
I feel like I can talk about this. And then I just sat on that. It was maybe, I forget how many words it was, 1,500, 2,000 words. It wasn't that long. And I just sat on it for a couple of years. I was like, well, someday maybe I'll go back and I'll add to that. And then I remember in 2023, Emily Wilson, a professor a classics professor at the University of Pennsylvania, published her translation of the Iliad, fall of 23, and I immediately, it was one of those things where I pre-ordered it, so it just showed up in the mail as soon as possible, and I was really, really excited about it. And it was brilliant. Like, I read it, and I was like, oh, this is the best. Like, she did such a good job. Because lots of people have translated it. There's lots of ways to translate it. But her translation really spoke to me. It was beautiful. It was intelligent. It was everything that I wanted. And I was like, this is the inspiration I needed to write my book. And so what my book does is it kind of goes through her translation of the Iliad and says, here's what's happening. And whenever I was able to do so, and here's what it looks like now.
Yeah.
It's different now. It's the same now. It's weird now, or whatever. And so the idea behind the book is to introduce someone to the Iliad who hasn't read it. And it's like, oh, that's, I don't know, too long or too many catalogs of ships going on there. To say, hey, read this to get a sense of what the Iliad is about, so that when you choose to read the Iliad, you're really well prepared to get in there. Or if you've already read the Iliad, here's another take on it that's pretty distinctive, because it's from an Iraq War veteran, and there's not a lot of us writing about the Iliad yet.
Right.
I mean,
Right,
hopefully that'll change, but that's not happening yet. And so the book is supposed to be entertaining. I try to make it a little bit funny, and certainly very, very accessible. Anybody could read it. But it's also trying to be educational. If you are curious about modern day military, curious about ancient militaries, I talk about the Spartans and the Greeks and the Persians, and like, it's trying to do a lot. Even though it's a relatively short book, it's trying to do a lot of things, and I hope that it does them well.
Yeah, it's a extremely. I don't mean this. This is a compliment. I mean, just a really easy read for such dense topic. And I just want to touch on the for our listeners who are interested in this book, and I highly recommend you pick it up. But that point about accessibility, we were sort of joking a little bit before we started recording about 80s and 90s pop culture references, which is our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm here for those.
yeah, we could probably do an entire year's worth of shows on those alone. But the thing that I think is so great about that is that you aren't forcing those analogies and those comparisons on us. That's coming organically from the text, and I think that really speaks to the sort of the universal themes that the Iliad and that modern day veterans are able to tap into. And I don't know if it's a life experience thing, or if it's just a worldliness thing, or what it is, or just that idea. I mean, 'cause, even for a Marine, a soldier, sailor, airman, coastie who doesn't deploy to a forward area, you're still in this community of, it's just a mishmash of different peoples, different languages, different backgrounds, different upbringings. And I think there's something that, I don't know, is it wisdom or whatever? But anyways, really long way of saying, I think that as fun as some of those movies are, and I think you'd reference like First Blood and Rambo and that evolution, that there is an under the veneer that is trying to speak to something about the human experience. And so it can relate to the Iliad in that way, and then it can relate to our personal experiences. I mean, am I
Absolutely
grasping here, or am I trying to make something else?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the themes of the book is war is terrible.
Right.
And I think it's one way to read the Iliad is like, oh my gosh, Achilles is badass. He is like all the Avengers combined into one superhero guy.
Right.
And that's not wrong. That's how Alexander the Great read the Iliad, and he went off to be. He said, "I'm the new Achilles. Like, I love this guy. I'm this shining superhero." But another way to read the Iliad, which really came to me when I read Emily Wilson's translation and really thought hard about, like, what do I want to say? I don't want to just summarize this thing. I want to actually talk about this thing. What really came out to me is that war is terrible and everyone in the Iliad is miserable. So Achilles is miserable. The guy is not a happy person. The family of Hector, whom Achilles kills towards the end, they are not happy. The other Greeks, they're like, oh, thank goodness Hector's gone. That guy was pretty rough. But they're still not happy. And so there's a message to the Iliad that is very much like, yeah, Achilles is awesome, right? And in some ways, or in many ways, he is the best. But what we're really talking about here is that all of this is miserable. Mm-hmm. Killing people for in war, yeah, sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you got to protect yourself, or you got to go protect your friends or your allies, etc. So I'm not anti-war necessarily, but I am very much war is a disaster. And as a child of the 80s and 90s, watching Schwarzenegger and Stallone movies, and just like, I mean, Predator is still one of my favorite movies of all time. It's
such a good movie.
I will watch the shitty Predator ones just because that one was so awesome. I'm not giving up on this franchise.
It's just so good. And but I grew up watching those movies thinking like, oh, that if you're a male who think, and I was always a big guy. Like, I was 6 foot tall when I was a freshman in high school. I'm 6'2" now. I was a wrestler. I was a boxer. I was like, I think I'm a tough guy. And so if you're growing up in that era and you like combat sports, or you're attracted to this idea of being a tough guy, well, Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and several others.
Break you.
Yeah, Ivan Drago. All right, they're showing you how to do it. And I was like, well, that's me then. That's what I should go do. I should join the military, and I should, be a boxer, and I should do these things. And it wasn't until later in life I was like, oh man, I thought, and a lot of people do think, and that my value to society was being good at violence. And that's what those Schwarzenegger, Commando, right? He is a good dad because he can single-handedly wipe out a compound to save his daughter.
Yeah, I mean, he kills half a dozen guys with the garden tools when he gets stuck. Yeah.
I never saw that.
You never saw Commando?
No, I did not.
My God.
It's a really great, really bad movie.
I'm going to put it on my list.
Yeah, right. And so, or obviously this, and now First, and I talk about this in detail in my book, First Blood's different. Right.
Yes.
First, I mean, it's a little bit crazy that he runs off in, I forget what state it is, Washington or Portland, but he runs off into the woods.
I think it's Oregon,
and he beats the National Guard single-handedly, right? Like,
sure.
A little bit much. Although and this is a tangent, but that movie does such a good job of showing the National Guard as a bunch of local guys being like, we're not ready for this.
Yeah, yeah. It's supposed to be coming out of Vietnam. I think that movie really resonated too, because a lot of people were joining the National Guard so they wouldn't get drafted. Yeah.
Like at one point,
so I understand. I wasn't there. But,
well, yeah, it's before my time, but not the movie, but the time period it's trying to represent, I think. But at one point, there's like a lieutenant and a sergeant walking through the woods, and the sergeant goes, "Don't tell me what to do. I'm your boss back at the pharmacy."
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? But that part aside, First Blood is a really intelligent discussion of what it's like to come back as a veteran and to have nobody understand what you've gone through or what you're dealing with. And I don't know. I don't think Stallone is a brilliant actor necessarily, but at the end scene where he's weeping and he's saying nothing is over. As a 90s kid, I was like, oh, this is the boring part. As a veteran, I'm like, no, this is the good part.
Right.
This is what the movie's actually trying to tell us. And the book, by the way, is really good too. Rambo's based off of a book called First Blood.
I did not know that.
Really, really good book. A little different than the movie, as almost all books are, but really good book. Of course, Rambo 2, he takes on the Russian, the Vietnamese. Rambo 3, he takes on the Russians in Afghanistan. And then 4 and 5, I'm like, okay, that's...
Yeah, he takes out a Heinz helicopter with a bow and arrow.
Or he gets shot in the side and he cauterizes it with gunpowder.
Yeah, I think it does. Like, it flames out. Yeah, it's insane.
I did not see that either.
Yeah. You're good.
Rambo 1, absolutely worth watching. Rambo, anything higher, it's entertaining as an action movie, but Rambo 1 is an action movie with a message. Rambo's subsequent are like, yeah, we're just action movies.
If we're talking Stallone, we could say that about the Rocky movies too. But anyway,
Yeah, one was.
Yeah.
one was enough.
I mean, he was like, I'm going to get as shredded as possible and going to make the movie as ridiculous as possible. Forget the fact that I actually made something really beautiful and meaningful the first time.
Yeah.
Although Rocky 2, in my mind, is basically Rocky 1 again.
Yes.
It's not till 3 where he's like, has like a 15-pack. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay, this guy
But then
really.
Rocky IV was just anti-Soviet propaganda.
But I will tell you, I love Rocky 4.
How could you not?
Watch it
he's-
over and over again.
He goes back to the original stuff. He's lifting hay bales and running up an icy
It
cliff.
is so good.
I did see that.
Yes.
It is so good.
But in that way, then, as much as it's fun to talk about these things, for Homer or for people who are, and you do a wonderful job of breaking down sort of the etymology, is that the right word? But
Yeah.
like the evolution of the Iliad. That much of what we read today may not have been what Homer had originally transcribed on
That's
the
also true.
papyrus, right? And, but because of the bards and because of the oral tradition of storytelling back then and of the way that history was communicated, there's probably some parallels in that. Because you mentioned like Diomedes, obviously Achilles. Hector is probably the most relatable human character within the Iliad, but it's because he has what would be, he's such a juxtaposition against this like uber warrior death machine thing that's going on amongst the Greeks. And so in that way, this was probably synonymous, or at least was in conversation with our 80s and 90s action flicks.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And also to bring us back, we got off on a movie tangent, which is great, but good way to bring us back to your original
He's
question.
good that way.
Hector is fascinating to me. The Iliad, if you're asking who's the main character of the Iliad, most people say Achilles, and that's a defensible answer. But Hector is the only character that's in every single book, and he's the only. Patroclus could compete for this, but he's the only character that actually is developed as a person. So he's a ruthless killer. He's very brave. He's very conscious of his image. Going back to what I was saying before, he's very conscious that his value to society is that he is good at violence. And he protects that. Like there's a scene where it's actually a really beautiful scene that shows you multiple aspects of Hector. He's with his wife and his baby son, and he's wearing his horse plumed helmet, and his baby son cries because that frightens him. So Hector takes the helmet off to comfort his son. You're like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like he cares about his son, he cares about his wife. But in that same scene, his wife says, please don't go back out there. If you die, the city will be lost. You're the only person that can protect the city, which is very, very true. And he says, yeah, you're right. If I were to die, it would be bad for everybody. But I'll be dead. And you're like, Hector, like he's a little dismissive of it because like, well, I won't be around to see it, so it won't be my problem, kind of a thing. Problem. It's like, oh, I was really getting to like you, Hector, but that type of message is not what we're going for here. But the reason he thinks that way is that being good at violence is the most important thing for him, right? His family is important, right? But they're
secondary.
Yeah, or tertiary. They're down that list, right? He needs to protect his image. He needs to make people respect him, and he needs to show that he is the best. And he is. I mean, he's arguably the second best. He gets into a whole lot of fights. He fights Diomedes that you'd mentioned, and Diomedes kind of beats him. He fights Ajax multiple times. But anyone that fights him either loses or it's kind of a draw. It's hard to beat this guy. He's that good. Well, then Achilles fights him and it's instant. It's like not competitive, right? Which is fascinating, and it just highlights the Achilles image as like the ultimate killer, right? The guy that just can't be stopped. And there is that 80s and 90s Schwarzenegger, Stallone, like, oh my gosh, he can't be hurt, or if he is hurt, he doesn't care. He always finds a way to beat everybody. He's unstoppable, and I think as human beings, all of us very much want to be valued by the community that we live in, whether that be, there's so many ways that could be, right? As the smart person, as the nice person, as the wealthy person, as the good cook, you name it. And I think for a lot of us 80s and 90s kids, added probably at the top of that list was, oh, I want to be valued by society because I'm a badass. I'm the tough guy. Like, I don't cry. I don't feel emotions. I can win every fight, etc. And the Iliad is in that world, right? You know, the young Greek men that would listen to as you were saying, the bards sing these stories, they would be like, and Alexander the Great was Macedonian, but was one of those young kids listening to this. They're like, that's it. That's what I want to be. And what I write about in my book is like, that's a very human desire, and I'm not critiquing it or saying that it's awful. It's extremely human. But I would say, I think anyone that is caught in that idea that they're only valuable as a tough guy or as a killer should recognize that nobody is only valuable on that way. There's lots and lots of ways to be valuable. And in fact,
it comes at a huge price.
It comes at a tremendous price because, you know, and I guess we can go back to First Blood. John Rambo's really, really good at killing people. He's a Green Beret or something or other. Like, yeah, so he's just really good. So he comes back to the United States and nobody needs that anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
right? It's a good thing that society doesn't need people who are incredibly good at killing. And so I wouldn't say the First Blood is all about this, but there's a layer to First Blood where he's like, I don't know what to do.
Well, the thing that makes it so, I think that makes that scene you're talking about so visceral, it's his former commanding officer. The guy who did, like, send him into the world to destroy it is now telling him, you have to...
And he's maybe the worst person to do so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But he also understands. So it's this weird juxtaposition. Yeah. Like, he's the worst person to do it, but probably the only person who
maybe
can.
The only person. Yeah, the only person is the worst person. But yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with that. And then he shows up in the subsequent movies in strange ways. But we don't, like I said, we've already talked about that. Yeah, please.
No, I want to go back to the idea of making the classics accessible.
Yeah.
So... I think maybe it's just a product of my, crappy public school education in the Florida Panhandle. But, when we were taught the classics, it was a snooze fest. And I have been an avid and voracious reader my entire life. But it was like, oh, God, could this be any worse? So I love the idea of making the classics accessible, and you said that earlier. So why should Marines read the classics, and what's a good way to get started doing that?
Well, I think, to your second question, read my book. That's obviously a very biased.
I set you up with that
very biased answer, but the book is designed for people who want to understand why the Iliad is pretty cool. And my goal would be that you would read my book, which is less than 200 pages, and then say, I do want to see what he's talking about here, right? Because I give you snippets of it.
Yeah, the footnoting is really well done.
Yeah, like you could read my book and say, I know what the Iliad is about now. But it still isn't the same as actually reading it. And so I would encourage any service member or former service member to read it, not my book necessarily, but the Iliad, because there are moments in there that are very, very human, even though it's 2,600 years. I mean, of course, they were humans 2,600 years ago, but
they're so relevant.
Yeah, the book is able to portray human feelings and pain and motivations in a way that, even though it's a very, very old text written by a culture extremely different than anything we have alive today, it's still very human. And you will feel sad when, Hector is comforting his baby son, because you probably know what's going to happen to him. Or you will feel sad. I mean, the saddest part of the Iliad for me is at the very end, right towards the very end, the 24th book, the beginning of the 24th book. Hector's father, who is the king of Troy, Priam, he sneaks into the Greek camp to beg Achilles, who killed Hector, to get Hector's body. He wants the body of his son. And he sneaks into Achilles' tent, and Achilles is like, oh my gosh, the king of Troy is in my tent. And they both weep together because it's just so sad. And Achilles has a father, Peleus, who lives back in Greece, and he's reminded of his father, and he's like, I'll probably never see my father again. And Priam is obviously sad because his favorite son, his eldest son, his heir is dead. And so they're just sitting there weeping together. And I think that's really powerful because, Achilles is badass, but like he's full of sadness and emotion. And he's comfortable with that, right? Like he says, I can be sad, I can cry. I mean, boys don't cry, right? That's another 80s and 90s vestige. And I don't know if current generations feel it to the same degree, but certainly I was inadvertently, I think, but still raised that way. The Iliad, people cry all the time in the Iliad. They don't mind, right?
Interesting.
And so I think that, a lot of people, and it doesn't have to just be service members, certainly, but a lot of people can read that and say, wow, this is the oldest book in Western literature, and it's talking about stuff that I'm dealing with today. Right? I mean, hopefully you're not dealing with like ransoming your dead son, but the emotions,
Right.
the emotions of loss,
Yeah, exactly.
the drive to find value, right, and the struggle to find value, like what I want society to be glad that I'm here. What's the best way for me to do that? And maybe not that way, right? Maybe not the way that the Iliad shows us, because Achilles, as I've said a couple times, greatest superhero, him and Heracles, the greatest superheroes of Greek mythology, both of them are completely miserable.
Yeah.
There's a line, I mentioned it in my book there. The book doesn't talk about the Odyssey too much, but it references it a couple times. There's a line in the Odyssey which is just brilliant. Odysseus, who is alive, goes to the underworld, and he runs into the ghost, the shade of Achilles down there. And I can't quote it exactly, but Achilles says essentially, I'd rather be the lowest ranking a helper of a farmer, like stable boy. I'd rather be the lowest ranking like helper than the king of the dead. And there's a couple different ways you can think about that, but my take on it that I talk is, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
He did all this stuff. He was the best ever. He died young. His best friend gets killed. Then he gets killed. Not in the Iliad, but in a later story. And now he's dead. And he's like, this is the worst. Like, I'm super famous. You could call me the king of the dead. I would rather be the
alive.
Lowest of the low
Yeah.
and alive than have this. Because, time in the Iliad is not something to really trust, but he's probably... the Iliad tells us he's only 20.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Because it's a 10-year, we're picking up at the 10th year.
Actually,
of the
no,
war,
I might be mistaking him for his son. But anyway, he is
a young man.
bizarrely young in the Iliad, and it doesn't actually make sense. But he's acting like somebody who's young, someone who is still defining themselves, and he's defining himself through violence. And again, sometimes, I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes violence is necessary. I mean, I there are people that say it's never necessary, and I'm like, I really want to believe that, but I think there's just too many instances where bad things were stopped, unfortunately, through violence. So I'm not anti-war, I'm not anti-violence, but obviously anything can be taken to an extreme, and the Iliad is an example of that, something that's taken to an extreme. So again, going back to your really great question, that would be something that I would want people to get out of it. Another piece, though, on the positive side, I don't want us to be like, oh my gosh, read the Iliad, you'll be so depressed at the end. Like, I'm not trying to emphasize that.
Need a good cry?
Yeah. I want to feel bad about yourself. The Iliad, it has this, I guess I'd have to use the word glorification again, but kind of like this glorification of being the best. And there's actually two different lines in there where it's through a flashback, but people are like, yeah, my father told me I have to be the best. And so if you want to put a bit of a positive spin on it, you can say, well, yeah, a lot of these guys are trying to be the best at violence. Okay, that has some problems to it, but they're also a bunch of people just like trying to be the most that they can be. Like they're all wealthy. Everyone that you read, just about everyone you read about in the Iliad is a prince or a king. So they're all these wealthy people. And if they wanted to, they could go back home and just be wealthy. But instead, they're saying, no, I want to like go be the most of whatever I can be. And I think I can give you an example. There's a company, or an organization called Iliad Athletics that's run by Patrick Whalen and Brian Kluckman. And they've kind of adopted that attitude of like, come out here. It's a program that it's like I'm struggling here. It is a physical fitness program for students.
Okay.
So like K through 12. And they take the students out in the woods and they kind of like embrace that mentality of like, toughness. There's good
physical exertion.
Yeah, there's good things with being tough. There's good things with pushing yourself. There's good things with not being a king and resting on and just spending your money. Like, and so I think the Iliad, it's in the context of war, which is troubling because they're trying to take over a city and kill all its people, but they're doing so in this way of thinking that is, you've got this young athletic body, go see what you can do with it. Like, so obviously, and today, we would translate that today into sports.
Sure.
Right? And I think there's value in recognizing that mentality and recognizing that push. And I think I joined the Marine Corps for a bunch of reasons, but one of them was I wanted to push myself. Like I could have joined any of the other services, all right? I was like, but why would I go for an easy service? Why not go for the hard service? And then when they said, hey, go do the smart thing, I was like, well, that's not physically challenging, but intellectually challenging. Let's go challenge ourselves. We're going to be challenging ourselves intellectually, Josh, or yourself intellectually. Why don't you go do both now, intellectual and physical challenges? So I can connect with that attitude, and I think there's a lot of value in that attitude of like, let me go be the best thing that I can be.
And how do you get that message across when you teach classes? Is that something? Is that a message that you try to present, or
is it just straight text?
Well, no. So, and this goes back to what you brought up before, where some of these classics can be kind of boring. So it's getting harder and harder as I get older, but I try to, as I do in the book, to connect the classics to modern day stuff. Right. And so, we talked about Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Obviously, my students now are like, oh, those old guys?
Yeah.
I guess they are actually pretty old now. But
okay.
And I'm a little, but I'll talk, and I used to talk about Game of Thrones, but even that now is arguably a little bit too old, which I'm like, oh my gosh, things are moving too fast. Game of Thrones is already too old to reference. So I need to spend some more time watching what the current,
what the kids are watching.
But, one thing that's really been, I'm very fortunate in that I am sincerely enthusiastic about these texts. So when I teach and when I write, I really open the doors to that enthusiasm. Like, everybody, I love this, and you're going to see that love. You're going to see how much I think this is great. And I'm like, and you're going to be confused by it. And you're going to like, okay, why? I'll go back. I've been beaten up on the catalog of the ships, so I'll do it again. So that's chapter 2 of the Iliad. And it is just a listing of people that showed up. Well, the second half is just a listing. The first half is actually a speech that Agamemnon gives that I compared to a speech that General Mattis gave when I was that I got to be there for and was in Kuwait. That was really exciting, and that's one of my favorite parts of the book, actually. But the second half is this catalog, and I tell people, okay, sure, yeah, it's just a listing. And honestly, you could just skip it because it doesn't support the story to know how many ships came from Sparta. It doesn't help you. But there's something really interesting about the catalog of the ships. The listing of the different locations is in this geographical order, right? And several of the cities that are mentioned weren't there when Homer was alive, but the order is still accurate, right? They're archaeological ruins, they're under the ground, and so the catalog of the ships, sure, it's just a listing, but it's also a multi-hundred-year-old memory of where cities actually used to be. And so when you think about the fact that like there's something
that's pretty amazing.
There's something packed in there that's actually really kind of cool. And if you like chart them out, and you're like, okay, Homer should not have known that where this city would have been, right? But he gets the order right. And so probably because the first bard, as you were saying earlier, the first bard who started to tell the story, those cities did exist in his day. And he's like, okay, here's this one, and then you go south, and then you go south again, and there's this one. But then those cities became abandoned, and they collapsed, and they became these like dirty hills. That's what all cities become, is dirty hills. And but the sequence was still remembered. So even in the most boring part of the Iliad, there's something in there that you can be like, oh, actually, that's kind of neat. That it's reflecting a 300-year-old memory of geography.
That's so cool.
That's very cool.
So so I try to like, in a sense, throw that at my audience and be like, but think about it this way,
right?
Or we're still doing this, right?
Well, then, like as you mentioned in the book too, is that you get to see sort of, because like you were mentioning, like the Greeks at that time didn't really have a hierarchy within within their royals. They were sort of peers.
They were the rich folks and the poor folks.
Right. But through that listing, you could see sort of who was top dog and who wasn't. Like, why was Agamemnon the sort of the commander-in-chief of the Greek army? Well, look at how many ships he brought.
Yeah.
So it kind of has the biggest slice of the pie.
Absolutely.
So let's give him the con,
Yeah. That's exactly it, yes.
Well, this is so cool. And this is one of the many things, I kind of ran out of time, but this is such a good discussion. But there's so many things in the book too that you juxtapose modern day military stuff, and we've talked about sort of the 90s action hero version, which is so different than the way we actually employ forces in real life. And then you also mentioned the dynamic of the buddy fucker, the Blue Falcon.
Yeah.
But that is actually hailed because that's where you get glory. But it's, again, so antithetical, especially for Marines, that I'm going to step on your back to elevate myself. And it's not to say that it doesn't exist within our ranks. We all know it does. But when it's found out, it's like that shit, like you become persona non grata.
Yeah.
Because you don't undermine the unit just to elevate yourself. Or at least that's what we want. That's
Absolutely.
the culture we're trying to cultivate. I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts on sort of, as you were going through the text and thinking back on your own experiences, like where these things were aligned and where they weren't necessarily?
Well, yeah, your example is a really great one, so thank you for bringing it up. Achilles is a Blue Falcon, a Bravo Foxtrot, a Buddy Fucker, whatever you want to go with, at like the highest level, right? Like he willingly leaves the war, withdraws from the war, and he knows, not only does he know that his own side will get killed, his own comrades will get killed, he actually asks his mother, who is a goddess, to go to Zeus and make it happen. And the reason he wants Greeks to die is so that they will beg him to come back. I'm like, if someone did that in the United States, well, first off, they would immediately go to prison. I hope that they would immediately go to prison, and everyone would cheer the fact that this person went to prison. It's just terrible. But to the ancient Greeks, he was the pinnacle of everything that was martial and manly.
Yeah.
And I brought it up a couple times now. Alexander the Great loved the guy, and so, you know, in a culture where personal glory matters most, he kind of is a hero. In our culture now, sure, we still like personal glory, but we're so much more aware of the value of the unit and the teamwork. And that's also way more realistic, right? So if the Trojan, I talk about, did the Trojan War actually happen? If it did happen, as I said earlier, it was rich folks with armor and poor folks with probably sharp sticks. We don't know much about how most people were armed, but there wasn't a lot of metal. It was way too expensive. And so the rich folks that had armor were probably in the front, and they were fighting the enemy rich folks with armor, and then everybody else who had slings and stones and whatever else they had.
Shields.
Yeah, exactly. They're just running around doing whatever they're doing, but the armored folk don't care because they want to kill the other armored person because A, they're the most dangerous part of this army. B, if I kill you, I get to take your armor, which happens in the Iliad multiple times. And so that is, the Iliad in that sense is probably kind of close to the way warfare might have actually existed in the late Bronze Age, like 1200 BC. But when Homer is writing about it, that's when we have hoplite warfare, right? So we've got formations and people are working together and my shield protects you and this guy's shield protects me. And so there's this other poet that I write about in here, Tyrtaeus. He's a Spartan poet, and he is very similar to Homer in that he's like, the greatest thing you can do, the greatest value you can be to your society is to kill another person, to be a warrior on the field of battle. But what he does not do is say, and go do it by yourself. He's like, actually, no, stay in formation, right? Protect the people to your left and to your right. And so there's a big, so Tyrtaeus is writing about real war that was happening in, the classical age. Homer is writing about mythological war, which, as I said a few minutes ago, was actually maybe a little bit close to accurate, right? It was a different type of fighting back then. Very few people had armor. But just those, even though they're contemporaries or very, very close contemporaries, their attitudes about war are very different. And Tyrtaeus is much closer to what we are today. Like, your unit matters. Protect your unit. Protect your people.
Yeah.
And
it's like the difference between like Commando and Saving Private Ryan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh.
That's a great.
Done,
Vic. That just came right from
No, that is a perfect analogy, though. Absolutely.
Really good.
We should end there. Or at least I should leave.
Podcast gold right now.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming in, taking the time to spend. This book is so good. Again, like you mentioned, I mean, it is like you said, it's under 200 pages, but your footnoting is really well placed, and it's so easy. It's hard to really put it down because you're like, well, shit, I just read 20 pages. I could do 20 more.
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah, no, you really do a very good job of sort of balancing with your page breaks and stuff. It's very easy to follow, even though it's a lot of really dense material.
Well, thank you.
But before we close out, so where can people find your book?
So Blue Ear Books is the publisher, and they publish a lot of veterans, so I would recommend a lot of their books. You can find it on Amazon, and then I also have a website, veteransiliad.com.
Okay.
And you can find it there.
We'll put that in a show description.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so that my website has more information about the book. It's got the first chapter. People can download the first chapter and, try before you buy or whatever that phrase is. And then you can buy it through Amazon or through Square on my website.
Okay. And I like to close out the show whenever possible with this question. What was your best day in the Marine Corps?
Well, there's a part of me that would say the day I got out.
That's not an uncommon response.
We've had that answer. It's okay to say that if it's true. It's totally fine.
Well, I don't know if I've got time for that story. There were bad parts of that day, too. One of the best parts, at the end of the Crucible, right, so I'll go all the way back to boot camp.
Yeah.
At the end of Crucible, your drill instructors give you the Eagle Globe and Anchor, this little, I think it's the part that goes into the piss cutter, right?
Yeah.
So I can't really call it a pin, but it's a little token. I don't know what to call it. And I remember a drill instructor, Sergeant Vargas, who went on to become a sergeant major, gave me my pin, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, "Good job." And this man had terrorized me for 3 straight months, and he was the worst of the 3. We had 3 drill instructors. They were all frightening, but Vargas was a nightmare. And he gave me the pin, and he said, "Good job," and I could see in his eyes that he meant it. And I was like, holy shit. He
awesome.
meant that. Like, previously, he thought I was dog shit or made dog shit look good. Like, and here he is giving me this little tiny, I don't even know what metal
decal,
is. Yeah, decal. And he did it. I get why he became a sergeant. He's retired now, but I get why he became a sergeant major because that tiny 3-second gesture, I'm still thinking about it 26 years later.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
amazing.
awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
love
really
that.
great.
So thank you, Sergeant Vargas.
That's great.
Sergeant Major Vargas.
Retired.
Retired.
USMC.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you again so much for being here. This is a really great conversation. And yeah, everyone, please go check out Fatal Second Helen, a modern veteran's Iliad, and check the show description for links to purchase it. And so, Josh, thank you again.
Thank you.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.